Hello, this is Gary Aldridge with Aldridge Valuation Advisors, and I teach business owners how to build and sell their business for more money. We also use this time to help bring other people to the podcast to share what they're doing because life's more than just making money and paying bills and stuff. So we want to bring people on board here that are actually touching lives and impacting lives both near and far. So today we've got a guest, Jenny Williamson, and Jenny's a friend of mine. We're both from the same hometown of Jackson, Mississippi. So if you hear a Southern accent, you'll know where it's coming from. And she started a nonprofit ministry several years ago, now about 20 years ago, called Courage Worldwide. And we're just going to talk with Jenny and get an update from her about what's going on with Courage. Jenny, thanks for coming so much today. We appreciate you visiting with us.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Well, just it's been a while since we had you as a guest, so just refresh our memories about your story, about how you got involved with Courage Worldwide and exactly what it is.
Absolutely. Well, my husband and I, like you, were business owners and, built a family, built a business. And there was always that piece like, is there more to life? What can you do with this business skill set? Could we help somebody? And so out of that need and want of our hearts, I learned that I live in a world, or we live in a world, where children are sold for sex. And when I looked across the span of the world, that seems like a daunting thing to even want to address when you see millions of people still in slavery and you think, how could I, this little girl from Mississippi, affect millions of people in slavery? And, you just boil anything that feels that big down to, well, what's happening in my own backyard? And we just learned that our most vulnerable children in our society, which are our kids that are already in foster families, typically, or kids with families who don't protect them, is who human traffickers prey upon. And so I went from just brokenhearted and feeling helpless to, well, what can I do in my own backyard? What can I do for these kids? And so I just started doing research on the issue of human trafficking, particularly child sex trafficking, and just learned that there's a severe lack of resources and residential facilities and homes for them. And I thought, oh, how hard can that be? And raised my hand and said, I'll do it. And but I will tell you, besides a compassionate heart, to start a nonprofit organization, to jump in the field, especially of residential care, you do need a really good business background. It's not just faith and compassion that's allowed us to be here. And we are celebrating our 20th anniversary this year. I'm so excited.
Yay.
I can't believe what started as a dream 20 years later has helped over 200 kids. So I'm
Wow.
blown away by that myself. But yeah, it was just a need to make a difference is how it all started. And then researching the issue and finding out what the challenges and gaps are, and then trying to plug in and meet those needs. And so now we're in an expansion mode. We have a program that we feel can be scaled and replicated literally around the world.
Wow, that's amazing. Give us some of the highlights of some of the good stuff and then maybe some challenges too that happened in 24.
Gosh, it was a good year. We moved our offices in 2021, or opened offices in Reno, Nevada, which is in the Lake Tahoe area. And if you don't know much about Nevada, it's a lot of land and a lot of desert. And there's two big cities, Reno and Las Vegas. And in our state, we still have counties that legalize prostitution. And so this is one of the areas that just really broke my heart, because there can be an apathy about this subject when there's legalized prostitution, thinking, oh, what's the big deal if they want to? And so my heart was really broken over that. And we were so excited in 2024 to build an amazing board of directors to really work with the counties here in Nevada to meet this need. And so we're in the process. We've identified a property. That was the big wow. Beautiful ranch. We keep it a safe house to keep the girls safe. But we look for wide open spaces where we don't have a lot of neighbors. We can keep the girls safe physically and emotionally. And the county here awarded us $250,000
Wow.
just to say this is a huge need in our area, and really endorsed our program. So that just gave us a lot of credibility here in this area as we were looking to expand. our location and program. And then another big wow for me personally in 2024 is the dream and the vision has always been to create a program that we could scale and take to other places. So other individuals who had that compassionate heart, who wanted to help kids, wouldn't have to start from scratch like we did, which was very expensive, very messy. I said I have lots of battle scars and wounds from doing all the wrong things and then a few right things along the way. And so we had an organization reach out to us from Texas about merging and actually just acquiring and taking over their program. And so I felt like that was just a kiss from God or for the heavens saying, yes, you're ready to go. You're ready to do this. And at the same time, we have an international program in Tanzania, Africa, and we'll be expanding into Kenya this year.
Wow.
Same thing. I know other people are now approaching us and asking us to bring our program. Residential care for minor children, it's a difficult space because you do have to work with the government. If these kids are in foster care, then the state is actually their parent. So there's a lot of oversight that happens, a lot of, criteria you have to meet, from funding to policies, procedures. And a lot of people who just get in the space to help people just don't have that experience or background. And so we really feel like this 20 years of work that we've put into it is now ready to launch. And there'll be more details about that we'll be providing on our website. The acquisition and merger hasn't happened yet, so I'm not ready to give away all those details. I get so excited, I usually do. So I'm trying to use wisdom here, Gary, and not just blurt it all out. But we're just really excited about the momentum that 2024 gave us, and the strategic partnerships and relationships, and feeling like we're not a toddler or a baby anymore. We're growing up. Maybe we're in the teenage years, or I don't know what that looks like.
So the Texas opportunity is still open. I won't drill down to the details yet. It's still an open opportunity for you.
Yeah, it is, and it's very exciting to us because they have a beautiful facility. They have a beautiful program. There's nothing that needs fixing. It's just a really unique situation where their founder passed away, and their board of directors wants to see her dream continue. And they have amazing staff, but that staff is just taking on everything. And it's really hard when you're a founder like I am, and you feel like this is your baby, and there's a attention to detail that a staff that you pay doesn't have. And when you have that passion to see this baby grow and function, and it's kind of like they've lost that. And so they're just looking for a partnership, and they just don't want to see the dream die and all the hard work. And they just have so much to build upon that it's just really exciting to us to see this. I call it a true merger because we'll learn from them, they'll learn from us. And it just gives us a reach for children, literally from the West now coming back to, the Southwest, and more opportunities for future growth.
Tell me more about, I know you got something special coming up in the summer, trip to Tanzania. Tell us about that.
Yeah, we were trying to figure out, this is our 20th anniversary, and it's so hard. How old am I? 64. I'll be 65 this year. I was like, oh my gosh, I started this in my 40s. What was I thinking? Like, wow. And it's so interesting to me because when I was in my mid 40s, I was like, I want my next 20 years to look different than the previous 20 years because I didn't think I had much to show for it. I was a mom, but I was like, that's not hard. There's lots of people that are moms, and my husband and I have a great marriage and a business, but I just didn't feel like I'd made an impact. And so realizing that was the little cry of my heart 20 years ago. And now looking backwards, this 20 years, I'm like, oh my gosh, so much has happened in this 20 years that the thing I dreamed about is actually become a reality. So we're like, how do we celebrate this? How do we, really just pause and not just keep trudging through as fast as possible and celebrate? And so I wanted to do a donor's trip to Tanzania, which is where our other location is. And everyone always asks me, why Tanzania? It's too long of a story to tell you, except that it was divine and it was ordained, and it was crazy that we opened the international home in Tanzania and then Northern California on the same day in the same year. I mean,
wow.
We just bookend the world. So we thought, wouldn't that be cool to take some of our donors and supporters that have either given financially or prayed for us or served on our board, to be able to take them to Tanzania and see what started out as a small little campus with 6 kids that is now turned into 4 campuses, 4 locations, and
Wow.
over 100 kids in our care with 65 staff members. And
Wow.
then why not do a safari while we're there? Because we're in Africa, which is amazing. And the people of Tanzania are so proud of their
Yeah.
country, and our staff is so proud of what we've built there. And I just want to honor our team. Joel and Stephanie Midtune in 2017 picked up everything from the United States, left their family, their church, and moved to Tanzania. And the growth
Wow.
that has been under their leadership is just phenomenal.
So you have 4 locations in Tanzania?
Yeah. We started out with one. It's called right at the base of Mount Kilimanjaro in the town of Moshi. And that's our campus for our under 18. And then we established a campus for when girls age out. So where do they go? And then we opened a cafe there that's an event center and job training for our girls. And then 2 years ago, we expanded to Dar es Salaam, which was the capital of Tanzania. And we're right there where all the embassies are and our offices. And so we opened a campus there. And in fact, we just doubled that capacity there last month.
Wow.
Yeah. I know. So there's a lot to see and do. And we just thought, what a way to celebrate and have people be a part of what we're trying to do.
Now, I didn't know about the opportunity in Kenya. Tell us what's going on there.
Yeah, we've been talking for probably about the last 5 years to groups of people from Kenya, Uganda, Malawi. It's just because you don't see a lot of new residential program for minor children coming on board. People eventually hear about what you're doing if you can just last that long, and on top of having a successful program. And so one of our governing board members is originally from Kenya, and that's why Kenya is attractive to us. Edna Simbi is on our board, and Edna lives in the United States. She worked for the UN and Goldman Sachs. She was educated here, but she also has a history of child marriage and what we now call, that is a form of human trafficking. And so she is wanting to go back home to Kenya and be our executive director there. So that's why it's super exciting and attractive to us, because we know her and her family, and she knows us, having to serve on our board for the last 5 years. And we just think this is a perfect opportunity. So we have like a 2 to 3 year plan and have begun that process of registering in Kenya and doing that. So we try not to get ahead of ourselves, because we never want to expand faster than we have the ability to cover our existing programs. And so when you go into new areas, it does allow you some grant expansion, because if you have different funders that are looking at different regions of the world, and also places where there's severe gaps and challenges in services, then that makes it very attractive, since we have an existing established program to bring.
That's amazing. And I'm just thinking how I can only imagine how everything kind of fell into place for Kenya, because it's all that stuff you can't even draw it up on a board. It just all comes together. It's a divine appointment, so I call it. So that's amazing.
Yeah.
What are some of the other plans that you have for 25?
Well, one of the things coming into a new area like Nevada, we were very quiet when we came here and researched the laws and researched the licensing process before we jumped out and announced that we were going to open a home, and then built that board of directors. And so one of the things that, because of this apathy I mentioned in the state that has legalized prostitution, instead of jumping in like full fundraising mode, we decided to host a child sex trafficking summit on May the 9th here, called Nevada's Children Are Not for Sale. And we have got an amazing group of people on our planning committee of established nonprofits that already work in this space, the counties that struggle to place children, law enforcement that actually recovers these kids, and try to bring the community together and just be a choir, all saying the same thing, that this is a problem in our state and in the United States, and that there is a severe lack of residential services for this population, and to just be a voice for these kids and shine some light on the people that already work with these kids, our social workers, our law enforcement officers, and really just salute them and honor them with what they're already doing. And then at the same time, challenge the community to say, the government shouldn't be taking care of children. And we want to bring a program here, and this is who we are, and really just introduce ourselves. And we've just got an amazing response from our partners. They've just wrapped their arms around us as a new nonprofit and said, welcome. There's no one else in this space. So we have no competition, if you will, for somebody already doing it. That's not who we are. If somebody was already doing it, we would just say yay. But we're looking at being in that space where we could provide some leadership and some capacity for placement of these kids.
Just walk us through, if you will, broadly and generally, of kind of like the young lady, then how they even get trafficked and how they find you, where you find them, and how you get them out of there, and what you do with them, and give us kind of walk us through that story of what that might look like.
Yeah, that's a great question, Gary, because especially right now where there's so much on the news and in our media about trafficking and the borders. And I will just say, in our experience, every one of the girls who have called Courage House home have been U.S. citizens.
Wow.
90% of them have been in the foster care system. And that's one of the myths that we address all the time, is this thinking that kids are being brought into the United States. And there are. But the largest number of trafficking that happens in the United States is with our kids. It's domestic. And that's just a reality that not many people are aware of unless you work with the population. And so what happens? A child is vulnerable. If they don't have a family that is protecting them, that makes them extremely vulnerable to a trafficker. If a child runs away, the FBI says they have a 65% chance of having some type of sexual exploitation. If they run away twice, that number goes to almost 95%.
Wow.
The traffickers look for kids that are on the street that don't have a home. They don't kidnap them. They befriend them. They love them. They feed them. They romance them, and they get them bonded to them. And if you don't have a home to go back to, and the only love that you've ever experienced is one that involved violence, you're not really shocked by a trafficker's behavior. And then at the same time, many of our kids that have been under our care were trafficked by family members, and that does not compute with our brains. For those of us who have had kids and sacrificed our everything for our kids, we can't even, like, I say that sentence and it like stops on the outside of your brain and you go, no. I mean, it makes you started shaking your head immediately. It's like, we can't fathom that. But that's one of the things that we are highlighting at the summit, and bringing in one of our professionals, Dr. Jean Allett, who has got extensive experiences doing a presentation on this. And in fact, my husband and I adopted, not legally, but brought into our hearts and home, 2 girls several years ago that were trafficked by their families. So this is a up close and personal situation that we just don't talk about. And so how these kids get recovered, most of these kids do not know they're a victim of a crime. They think they're doing something wrong. The trafficker puts vehicles in their names and phones in their names and hotels in their names. So, and then they're told that if they ever talk to law enforcement, they'll be arrested. And so they believe that they're actually a perpetrator of a crime. And so law enforcement does sting operations all over the United States multiple times a year to try and find these traffickers, put them away, recover these kids, and then find placement options for them. And that's where the severe lack comes in. Our law enforcement's really well funded to do this, but our social workers have kids on their caseload and they have no place to put them. And so that's our piece of the puzzle where we fit in. And then we have had private placements where family members have come to us and had a daughter that experienced this. And the traffickers use just a different tactic with them, which is shame. They take photos of them, they give them drugs, and then they tell them that they will, post this on social media, tell their families, and then expect them to be in places. And then they literally have them in captivity, though they're still living at home. And so
Yeah.
when families have found out about these situations, then they have had an opportunity to place with us. But most of the kids that we receive are from the foster care system.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, it's what happens so that's where they come from, and then they get to you. How do they get to Courage Worldwide? I mean, how's that connection happen?
That's a great question also because they are minor children. We're not a shelter. So people can't just drop kids off for us. They have to be quote unquote placed. So child protective services, child welfare that have encountered these kids either through emergency rooms in hospital, identified in schools, law enforcement's done recovery, juvenile justice has identified them because maybe they got picked up for drugs or something. So once they're identified, then there's a process where we do intakes, interview them, and are connected. And that's how some of our funding comes, is through those public agencies from the county or the state. Law enforcement doesn't even just drop them off straight off the street because they have to involve child protective services. Most states have adopted that law that if a kid is identified as a victim of trafficking, they want them to go through child services so we can track where the kids are coming from, where they're going, and what that happens. And then if it was your daughter, God forbid, or mine, then a parent could privately place with us, making us like a guardian ad litem, and that we'd be able to get medical care and give them mental health treatment and serve them. Those numbers are just smaller. And so it'll be interesting to see what happens as we expand into other areas, if there's more and more families, because some of the information that we're getting is because of where the economy has been in the past years and how expensive housing is getting, that our homeless population is growing, which if mom and dad don't have a place to live, this is making this kid vulnerable. So they may be a family that's not hurting their kid, but they don't have the financial resources to even provide them with residential care and make sure they're in school because they're trying to find jobs and stuff. So we may see in the future that we have more and more family placement opportunities.
I think you told me that you were looking at creating a new safe house in Nevada or that area, and the local authorities, and I forgot what agencies are called, DHS or whatever, said they could place, I forgot the number, like 10 or 20 kids immediately if you opened up, and they had a backlog of young kids, and they didn't have anywhere to put them.
Yeah. Yes. And that's most states. That's not even just here. And I think people are we opened in 2010 our residential program. And there was a group of us across the United States. There's probably 5 of us that were all kind of opening around the same time. And there's not many of them left. We're not seeing this increased amount of residential programs. So every state, thus our interest in Texas, because it is very expensive. And the states kind of think, oh, we already have foster care, so we already got things for children. But there's just not a great understanding of the trauma and what these kids have been through as a 15 and a 16-year-old. And so there's just not that many resources. And that's what we are trying to affect as much as we can. So it's not just Nevada, it's the lack of placement. If I could call any state, and they would probably tell me the same thing, you open today and we could fill you up. You open 6 beds, you're done. 12 beds, you're done. 18 beds, you're done. And Nevada's a very small state. It's just that because of Las Vegas and the activities and festivals and things like that around Reno, you have an influx of trafficking, that comes into a city when you have Formula One racing and Super Bowls and big, pro basketball games and football games. Those are just havens for traffickers.
I've heard that, I live in the Nashville area, that the triangle between Nashville, Atlanta, and Birmingham was a hotbed for trafficking because there could be, on a given weekend in Nashville, 500,000 people downtown, because they could have, if you have 2 or 3 different events going on, you get a name brand concert going on, and one was here last year, that alone brought in 250,000 just on over a weekend. And plus there were 20 other events going on. So the total for that weekend was 500,000 downtown. And it cannot hold 500,000. So that creates an opportunity for predators, although no pun intended. I mean, our hockey team's called the Nashville Predators, but those
Sorry.
I kind of backed into that one or fell into that one. But these are sexual predators that are just preying on vulnerable kids.
Yes,
And they've got
absolutely.
an easy, with the interstate system and trucking system, they got an easy way to get them in and out and move them around.
Yeah. Well, and that's the point, is moving them around, because anywhere you go in the United States, there's that circuit, as they call it, that's identified. For us out west, it literally travels. It depends on which way you want to circle it. But since I'm in Reno, I'll start with Reno. You're either going from Reno to Sacramento to Oakland to San Francisco to Las Vegas to LA back to Reno. And that is the thing. You keep kids moving. When we were in Northern California, every one of our girls that had come to live at Courage House had been in those cities I mentioned. And it's just wherever you go, because that's the nature of trafficking. Moving them is what's keeping the trafficker safe. And then when you have really big, like I think this year, the Super Bowl's in New Orleans, there will be a heavy FBI presence in New Orleans, and every jurisdiction from every state will send law enforcement, and they will be a concerted effort to look for juveniles who are being trafficked, because it's just traffickers will bring into events, especially just like you said, that are coming from out of town to be able to
Yeah.
pry that. It's a business. It is organized crime. It is a crime of demand. Everybody is so shocked when I say the United States is #1 in demand for wanting girls to be sold for sex. And everybody's just shocked by that. And so we have a country where that is what the trafficker supply and demand business. If we in the United States didn't demand children, they'd go back to selling just guns and drugs. But a child can be sold over and over and over again. So in the trafficker's mind, it's a low risk, high income return proposition.
So you've been working on this for 20 years. So let's just assume for a moment this is the midpoint, and you got another 20 years ahead of you. So
Yeah.
I remember, share with me, or share with us your vision, your goal, your dream that you would like to
Oh
do.
my
Because
goodness.
yeah,
I have to, I know we're in a business call, but with this question, I have to sometimes lapse into my faith-based language, because I'm a person of faith. I do believe this is my purpose. And 20 years ago, when I got this enormous vision for an international nonprofit, and it was just a dream, I really felt like my responsibility and my experience as a business owner was to build a framework that the next generation could build up on. So if you look at that word integrity with regard to a building, a foundation goes down and it goes really, really deep and wide so that you can build straight up. So I think my purpose is the foundation of this organization, so that the next generation, whether it's my kids or your kids or whoever the next generation is, that they can build it sky high and I'll see it from heaven. And so getting these bookend, a couple back in the United States, I'm kind of projecting to my 70th birthday to take on that board chairman role and get out of the day-to-day CEO president buildings. But, I keep hearing 70s, the new 50s. So who knows? I'm a new grandmother, but gosh, grandkids don't need you all the time. And I can only play so much pickleball. So I'll probably be here until they usher me out and say, Jenny, go away. It's time to leave.
I'm sure they'll love to have you there as long as they can. I mean, I remember you telling me something about, and if I tried to recount the numbers that you threw out, I would get them wrong. Just like 1,000 safe houses in 10 years in 100 countries or something like that. Does that ring a bell?
Yeah. That's
Yeah. So
I felt
what's
like,
that?
it's so hard when you have a dream or vision for something. I had an original dream and vision for these Courage Cafes, and took 18 years before one became a reality. So in my head, we wanted to open 1,000 homes in 100 countries in 10 years.
Wow.
And that kind of what we're seeing, this Texas and this Kenya piece, is that we have the prototype ready. It's ready to be licensed, where we don't have to do it all. We don't have to physically build those 1,000 homes in 10 years, but could we license 1,000 organizations and individuals to take this? And then Courage would just be like the quality control, the oversight, to make sure that the care and the programming was consistent. And that's really exciting too, because there's not a lot of data on this population, and everybody loves data to fund. Everybody wants data. And
Yeah.
so the more we can replicate ourselves, the more data that we will be able to provide for these kids. And that's really lacking um, in our industry, for lack of a better term. And just to help your listeners, because people get really confused by this issue and by 16-year-olds who say they want to sell their body because their boyfriend wants them to, and the law says they're a victim of a crime. Here's the way I think of it. Gary, in mine and your lifetime, a husband could beat and rape his wife and the police would do nothing. In
Yeah.
our lifetime, that has totally changed. I remember that. Now, no one blinks twice. If there's a domestic violence, it's now called domestic violence. Immediately when if you call, a policeman comes and they will arrest that husband. That's only happened since you and I have been alive. So I feel like we're at the beginning of what was the domestic violence movement with child sex trafficking. There is a lot of awareness that happens to happen, and there's a lot of communication that has to happen before we can get the laws we need. Laws had to be changed for domestic violence to be taken seriously. Law enforcement training had to happen, a new way of thinking. The community would ask, well, why does she stay with him if he beats her? But domestic violence has always had to ask and address that question. And so it's very similar, is that we literally are starting at the beginning of something. And I didn't know that. I thought I was jumping in the middle of a movement. I had no idea that we were pioneering some things. And so even though we're not an awareness organization, we have to spend time educating the community to be able to do that. And so I think that just helps. When I say that, people usually go, oh, okay. And if you're around our age, you do remember how drastically that has changed. And our state just got $6 million in federal funding for domestic violence shelters.
Wow.
Because they have the data. They started been working in this space now for 50 years. And so we're young. We're really, really young at putting this together and moving forward. And that's why I say the next generation will realize, I hope, all my dreams. I don't think in my lifetime I will, but I am proud to be a part and a voice and to be able to communicate at least our experience in this space.
Well, a lot of that, what I hear you saying, just with all the different groups that you're talking with, both domestic and abroad, the word that comes to mind is collaboration, and having to work with it, because you can't do it all yourself.
Oh, gosh, no.
And we had another guest on a podcast a week or so ago, and he's in an international missions organization, but he collaborates with over, I think it's 600 different organizations internationally. So that is to say, if you want to go into a particular country, if you need an inroad in there, I could probably connect you with somebody who can.
Yes,
And
please.
Somebody I met back in our hometown of Jackson, actually. So,
Wow.
let me know. I'll tell you about that sometime.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to.
Tell us how much does it cost to get a safe house going? I know the answer is it depends. A house in Nashville costs more or less than a house somewhere else. So, what does it take, just not only for the infrastructure, but the staffing and the support and all that? What are we looking at?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I got some really good numbers because we're working through that budget process right now in Nevada. So what we like to do is to go and buy between a 30 to 50 acre ranch, and that protects us. It just gives us a safe border, if you will. We're so fortunate in Nevada. Nevada is the largest state who has federal land. It's called Bureau of Land Management. So like right now, we have identified a property that backs up to that BLM. So I'm going to pay for 40 acres, but I'm going to get 100 acres because nobody can build on that land. So that's really exciting. So I call it $1 million piece of property, even though it varies from state to state. If you're building that kind of land with a house already on it. So we like a house already on it and a barn already on it, because instead of the community waiting for us to have to go build, we can take 6 kids immediately while we're constructing cottages and make a splash really quickly. And so we're going to the community here with a budget of $6 million. And what that will get us is the property, number one. It will get us 2 years of operating cost. And I have learned the hard way to build that in, because in order to hire the best of the best, I need to give them some kind of guarantee that we have some funding to pay them, because our whole program is just people. If you don't have people, there is no program. And we're hiring PhD level individuals
Wow.
and master degree individuals
Wow. Yeah.
because of the mental health component and the therapy and the counseling. And in the United States, equine therapy is just a really big part. We have seen it do amazing things, thus the barn, thus the horses. And then for this particular property that we're looking at, we're basing those costs, that $6 million nut, if you will, of building an activities building that gives you all your classrooms, your therapy rooms, activities, recreation, offices, and then also to be able to build 3 cottages. So we want these kids to feel like they're in a home and
Yeah.
not in an institution. So we build cottages that have 6 kids to a cottage with a house mom. And they really are modeling a family and learning to be in healthy relationships. And then they have the ability to plant their own flowers in their own garden and have some little ownership of their space. And we learned the hard way that our girls should have their own bedroom and not share bedrooms. Those are some of our horror stories that we've learned and with scars and to tell this tale. It makes it all better. And so but even with that big $6 million number, it's big to me, we
It's big.
phased it out. So it's like an initial 3 to get the land and that operating cost for the first cottage employees. And then we have a phase 2 when the other cottages are constructed to bring on the next staff. And the cool thing about this is you can phase it out about 3 phases, but you don't have to have multiple executive directors. You don't have to have multiple clinical directors. So your costs go down every time you add a child, except
Yeah.
for that supervisory staff. The rest of your staff, there doesn't need to be 3 of me and our operations manager and your accountant. And so you can really scale those costs down as when you go from 6 to 18 kids. That is like almost in half.
I imagine, and I would bet a lot of money in the next even next 5 years, you're going to see some rapid growth. I know it's taking you may seem like a long, hard road to get to where you are, and it has been, but you're going to see a rapid growth. And in the next 5 to 10 years, you're going to have many, many, many more locations throughout the
Wow.
world, really.
Wow.
So that's going to be great.
Well, I'll take that. I will take that from you. Absolutely. Because that is the dream. That is and it's just interesting that there is that exponential growth when you've got that established, that people are now coming to us. I was always running to everybody else, and I don't know what that season in business growth is. I'm sure you do, of where
Yeah,
now
I do.
people are coming to you saying, I've been watching, I'm interested. And so that is my prayer, is that we could literally have the kind of growth that we've only dreamed about, and really talking about, helping hundreds of kids in a year instead of over 15 years. That would be the dream.
But you said something early on. I'm gonna circle back to that and apply it to, if somebody's out there listening to this. It sounds like it's just too big to get involved with. It's international. It's millions of kids and millions of dollars. And you think it's just me. I'm just driving in my car, just doing life. But you broke it down. Instead of trying to fix the whole world, you just said, how can I make a difference just where I am? So how can somebody get involved with Courage Worldwide just wherever they are in the country? They don't have to be in Nevada. They don't have to be in Texas. They don't have to be in Kenya. How would they get involved with Courage Worldwide?
Right. Thank you for asking that, because I think we discount ourselves when we look at something that is so big. And I went through that. I can't make any difference in the whole wide world. And now 100 and something, 200 kids later, you can. And so I tell people, become an expert in what breaks your heart, whatever it is. I believe this was chosen for me. I have 3 biological sons, and I felt like God said to me, these are your daughters. What are you going to do about it? And anything and everything is the answer to that question. But the world has so many problems, and you don't have to have my passion. So I first say, become an expert in what breaks your heart. I spent 2 years after becoming brokenhearted over this issue and just deep diving into research. Get on our website. If human trafficking and child trafficking is that thing for you, get on our website, other websites, and then ask questions in your own backyard. I sent an email to our state representatives. I literally picked up the phone and called the police department and said, do we have a problem with children being sold in our city? And they were like, yes, like, duh, lady. And I was like, okay, well, can I come meet with somebody? And they said, yes. You'd be surprised how when you just break this down to very small, like, what can I do? I can send an email. I can ask a question. I can reach out and just learn, and then ask where the gaps are, ask where the challenges are. And then for us, it's like, reach out to your nonprofits. You can send an email to ours as info@courageworldwide.org and say, this is where I live. What can I do here? We're going to be doing a virtual race this year in August where we'll have T-shirts and saying children aren't for sale. And it's called our Courage Triathlon. Find out your local nonprofit that's doing something and volunteer. That's the first thing I did. I didn't know I was going to start a home. I looked for somebody where I could go volunteer in my backyard with a group in Cambodia and offered my services to them. Wow. And so it's just one step at a time. That is so trite, but everyone told me that over and over when I'd ask for expert advice and when I was so overwhelmed with what I verbally committed to. But it's just one step. And I listen to my heart instead of my head.
Yeah, I would say to tell people that first step is to visit Jenny's website, which is courageworldwide.org. Go to her website, read all about it, get all the information. I'm sure there's a newsletter on there you can sign up for. None of that costs you anything. You can learn all about it and get on the newsletter and learn, and you just go from there. That's all you got to do. Just go to the website. That's all you got to do is go to the website and sign up for a newsletter, and it's free, and you can opt out, I'm sure, but just do that.
And then we'll bombard you with information. We love celebrating our girls, and we don't get into depth telling our residents' stories. That is their story. I can tell you that human trafficking takes children as young as 4, 5, and 6 years old and sells their body for sex. It's rape. It is torture, and it is more than our brains can even accept.
It is.
It is. But that's why I hate the term human trafficking, because it just glosses over what these kids go through. But because I am not a victim, it's not my personal story to tell. And so we're very, just like I would be of my own children, I'm very protective of how we tell stories. But we love to tell what happens when these girls come to Courage House, start getting therapy, get an education, pursue a career. I mean, we have 26 girls in college in Africa. Africa.
Wow.
That's unheard of. So we celebrate those stories, and we have an amazing staff and help educate people on what human trafficking is, where it's happening in their area. And we'll just give you lots of information, and you don't have to pay for it all. And there's a big old donate button, though, at the bottom that you can always give, because that's how we run. But I think one of the things, too, for us, and having your listeners understand, when I gave that big $6 million figure, depends on who you are and where you are, if that sounds big or small. But the very interesting thing for us is once we get children in our facility, we have the opportunity then to bill Medicare, Child Protective Services. So we have sustainable funding that once we get that land, once we get that building, once we get the furniture and the staff in, then there's money that we get to be reimbursed for, so that we're not constantly, if you will, getting that begging nonprofit. We can't keep the lights on today. Please spend $5.
Yeah.
We try to stay out of that space because we do have the ability to have some sustainable funding that comes from the federal, state, and local government. But that's already allocated for these kids.
I was thinking when you mentioned triathlon, believe it or not, back in the day, I used to do triathlon, so maybe I don't do them anymore. That's a whole nother story for another time. But I want to thank you for coming. We've gone a little bit long today, but that's okay, because you've got a wonderful story, and I want people to hear it, and I want them to hear all about it. So thank you so much for coming. Keep me abreast of what's going on with the Texas opportunity and with Kenya and anything else that's going on. And we'll have you back again.
Thank you so much. I appreciate your time, Gary, and your friendship.
Thank you. Thank you so much. You too.
Mm-hmm. Bye-bye.